But all in all, they knew that the Klan was going to have its way that day, and they did. Because Jim Swerve and John really got beat up pretty badly that day.
John Lewis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to part 3 of our conversation with freedom rider Charles Person. This is Loki Mulholland, and it's time to get uncomfortable.
Looking back, what worked, and what do you feel didn't work that you wish you guys could have done differently?
I think organizing and working with the communities. We always had mass meetings in various cities, whether we were traveling or otherwise, to let people know what was going on. And I think it's what's so key about any type of demonstration, whether it's back then or now, is people need to know what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. So there's no misunderstanding. Right now, there's the biggest problem in most cities is that you don't know who's in charge. Unfortunately, the Black Lives Matter or groups. And I understand now, I didn't know at first, but I understand a lot of them have been threatened with violence. And, but I told them, I said, look, you're in the business. When you're organizing, the way you're organizing, somebody can get hurt or somebody can get killed. I mean, if you're not willing to accept responsibility, you probably shouldn't be in the organizing business. But the people need to know who's in charge. What your mission are, what your man's demands are. You have to define yourself and define your mission, so that then you won't have the misunderstanding like they have now. They say defund the police. No one knows what defund the police mean, as according to the Black Lives Matter, because we know there are bad guys out there. You can't do without a police force, but you need it. But see, the opposition, the Republicans are using defund as like you want to disband the police, and which is nonsense. But the thing is, politically, it's working for them. But the thing is, I always said, we have always told you what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And we didn't do anything at night. We never did anything at night. So no one can hijack your movement and go out and firebomb buildings and burn up cars and stuff like that. And you also had a stress code because generally, it's kind of hard for someone in a shirt and tie or a suit out there throwing firebombs. It just doesn't happen. So those are just some of the minor things that we used to, but we were well organized, and the people within our group knew what their mission was, and we all had the same agenda. Because if other people out there that they want to burn stuff, but see, they should not be a part of your movement if you consider yourself a nonviolent protest.
I think that in a lot of the people's defense that are out there now, I would say I agree with you about a lot of things, but what we were fighting against in those days was fairly clear. In other words, you couldn't vote, so that's a fight, and you couldn't eat in a certain place, and that's a fight. But most people were fighting those things. There were very specific things that they were fighting for. I think what's going on now is there's so much that's happening that people are fighting that they don't know what it is. They don't have a picture yet of what needs to happen. So they misstate a lot of what goes on. The other thing is there's so many people in the streets now fighting so many different things that it's difficult to find out who's leading what. See, back in the day when Farmer and Foreman and those guys were leading, and Dr. King, they knew what they wanted to do. We knew what they wanted to do. We knew what we were mad about. Kids out there in the street today, they're mad because they've been lied to. They're mad because people getting killed for no reason. They're mad about their future. They're mad about a lot of things. And they tend to misspeak when that happens. So I think that we just got to give them a chance to come up with whoever the leader is. There were people who thought that we, back in the day, shouldn't have had the leaders we did. In other words, because the press just sort of grabbed them and said, "Oh, that's what they're fighting about." So when Martin Luther King finally said, "No, I'm talking about something else now. I'm talking about people's right to work. I'm talking about a wage. Suddenly, things changed, but he was already there, and they used to tell us back then that we really don't need, eat somewhere. We really don't need those kind of leaders, and we didn't. But what we did do was specific because we wanted specific things. They don't know what they want now. And I don't think that's bad. I just think it has to come into focus. Like, for instance, if we want to know what defund the police means, we listen to Joe Biden because he explains it.
Now, Levon.
Yeah.
In hindsight, it's really easy to say, well, we knew we wanted this, and this, because we're looking back over 50 years and it's very well defined. But did the civil rights movement congeal that quickly into finding those purposes, or was it we tackle one, let's go to the next? Well, okay, well, what's the issue now, and let's go figure that out? Or was it really that well planned out?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't, because the first fight was the Freedom Riders had nothing to do with voting. Right? They were testing a law that the federal government had just passed about interstate travel.
Right.
So that was the Freedom Riders. And then when that started to peter out in the South, we had a whole issue about voting. So things changed. That any demonstrations we have or anything we go out and fight, it'll be about voting.
Right.
Well, actually, before that, you had the Civil Rights Act, which dealt with public accommodations, hotels, and all that kind of stuff, which was passed in '64.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at then is when I talk to people, I tell them, look, all things are local. What happens here in Salt Lake City is not going to affect Minneapolis too much, let alone Atlanta. But we have our own fights here.
Right.
And so during the movement, obviously you had Montgomery, you had stuff going on in Selma, you had Richmond and Jackson and Albany, and so you had these different things that might have had similar issues, but be it lunch counters, whatever, but things were a little unique to that. And again, like in hindsight, we can go, well, we had the sit-in movement. Well, okay, but that was spread over how many years? Because Jackson didn't happen until '63, and
right.
So you have these things, and again, it's like we look at it. We look at today, and we're going, man, well, you got stuff in Portland and here and that and this. It looks like a little bit of chaos.
It looks that way, but it's all about the same thing.
Right.
But also, you need to look at the freedom rides for a solution.
Mm-hmm.
When the freedom rides, after everything was said and done, when the edict was passed, it affected every state and every city at the same time. And they replicated that in '64 with the Civil Rights Act, that had a public accommodation all in every city and every state.
Yeah.
Voting Rights Act, the same thing. Now, what we need now is, instead of defund the police, what you need is a national law enforcement law or bill, and it would vary from city and state. There will be provisions for that. But what has to happen is that you got to take the demonstrations from the street into the boardrooms and the executive suites of the mayors and the governors. And then out of that group, once you get it in your state, in my state, then you need to come together as 50 states and come out with a standard, law enforcement standard that would affect every state in the union. And because otherwise, you're going to have reform in Utah, going to have reform in Portland, reform in Minneapolis, and it's just going to take forever. Just like the sit-ins. The sit-ins at first, you had 10 in Nashville. They were successful. Then Atlanta was successful. But you had to replicate that in each city. That's going to take forever. Whereas when you come together and do it as a nation, you'll have one law that affects all cities and all states at the same time.
Right, but you have models that work. People are trying different things. You start to learn from those in different places, and that starts to gel. I mean, remember the Brown versus Board was in '54, and the Civil Rights Act didn't happen until '64. That's 10 years of hard work to get to that point. And so we're just at the beginning, really, of this particular movement at this time. But I look at it from the standpoint of just saying, again, like the lessons, like you said, what's the organized, particularly from an organizational standpoint of what the work you guys did in Atlanta, compared to, Levon just running roughshod over Jackson, right? But you have that organizational sense that these sort of things can start to apply. And I just have to imagine that there was a lot of people back in that time who were looking on at the student movement and so forth going, these guys are just running all over the place. They're just running amok. Kind of the way we look at things today, not as, I'm sure the people doing the work on the ground in Portland and elsewhere do actually have a plan in a sense, but we just don't see those plans per se.
But here's, for example, the reason I say when about defining yourselves.
Yeah, but Charles, you said in the beginning is that you guys made sure you broadcast what that plan was, and like Levon said, you had to have a clear objective. We don't know what those objectives necessarily are at the moment, be it for Portland or anything else. I mean, like you said, this nebulous defund the police concept. So you guys broadcast that. You made sure everyone knew this is what the plan is. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it, and we're going to keep doing it until you sit down at the table and start talking, right?
Right.
And I just don't quite see that yet, per se.
But here's what I'm saying about direction. Okay. For example, each march or demonstration had a purpose.
Right.
And one of the things that some of the Black Lives Matter groups have done here in Atlanta, they would go to shut down the interstate. My thing is, we also had what you call a power analysis. Who in the city or state can make decisions, and who can you get through to make decisions? The thing is, if you have a beef against Kroger markets, why would you pick it Publix market? In other words, you have to know, you want to impact the people who can make decisions. In other words, if the mayor can't make decisions, then you go to the governor. But the thing is, just the march for the sake of marching, and in most of these cases, they would march downtown, and then they would disband. We never would leave our people downtown. We would always march and do what we got to do, but then we march back to where we assembled. Because in Portland, when that happened, the stragglers, that's one of them got killed. You as a leader of a march, you're responsible for those people. You need to get them back to safety. But you just don't disband. You go down, you have your demonstration, you pray, you sing a few songs, you have some few speeches, then you march back to where you come from. But you don't just disrupt it. And you want to impact people who can make decisions. I mean, you're shutting down a street. I mean, you got to develop allies. To be successful, you got to have allies. You got to have people who are sympathetic to your cause. How you do that is you do it in a manner so they know that, hey, that's my people. Hey, I might want to join the march next week because they're after what I want to do. But the thing is, you have to target those persons who can make decisions. Just to march for the sake of marching, you got to have a purpose behind your march. Mm-hmm. Or your demonstration.
I agree with part of what you're saying, but we were not in the beginning. I agree with Loki. We were not, depending on where you were, whether or not you had that kind of organization. It depended on what you wanted. For instance, when we were in the Delta and Mississippi, we were trying to get people to go and vote. But when we had a march, first of all, we didn't know who was going to show up, because the conditions were you might get killed marching with those guys. So what's going on now is if we listen to what's happening, I think that in some places, what you talk about organizing having people together, that's happening. For instance, to have the leader of a party, Joe Biden, who's running for president, talk about what they mean by defund the police. They don't mean defund the police. They mean all that money that we're giving to the police department, we're asking these guys to go out and gals, to do things that they are not trained to do.
Yeah, social work and stuff like that. Yeah.
So there are states like mine who will now say, wait a minute, they're right. We should do that. We should have a national database. Well, that's good because now you have a couple of states that are saying that. California says that. So they're having an impact, and they're being forced to say what they want, these kids. But the fact that many kids are out there, and there are little towns all around New York where people are putting up signs that say Black Lives Matter. All the athletes are wearing signs that say Black Lives Matter. So there are things happening, and there are people who are in leadership positions who are saying, you know something, they have a point. Now you have some people that, they're full of it when they say they want to do things, but there are leaders who are saying that. And some of them, you can't trust the leaders because they will say whatever they have to say to keep the people that run things happy. So you can't tell me, when you tell me that we have to do things in Georgia so that the police will do X. Well, I know I've been in Georgia, and I know that there are towns now that you couldn't pay me to go to.
No.
There are towns that I like. So things will happen at a rate that maybe we're not happy with, and in a way we're not happy with, because people are different. But we had some of the same kind of thing that used to go on during the movement.
But one of the things we've learned, and here's my point of view, is that in the past we've had demonstrations. Go back to Ferguson, we had demonstrations. After Trayvon, we had on and on and on. I'm saying it's time to move the demonstrations from the street. In other words, you've got to get to a point where, hey, you got to sit down and negotiate, regardless of what it is, what city it is. It doesn't matter. Right. Because what I'm saying is that each city is different, but they're also, each city is alike. But most of them have these riot squads. They got all kinds of militaristic type of names for their police and so forth. That's not going to change. But what I'm saying is that it has to change, because we cannot continue. In every demonstration in the past, we demonstrated and nothing happened. I'm saying we've got to go beyond the demonstration, and we got to take the same energy. Here's what I'm saying. If you take those same people that you got marching, okay, you go and you negotiate with the mayor or the governor. They don't agree. Okay, then you boycott those same bodies that you had marching up down the street and all that stuff. Now you got people who can picket the places that you're going to boycott. So you can still use that energy. You can still use those people. But the thing is, after every murder, a Black man that has been murdered, a woman, there's been demonstrations, and that's just it. We just demonstrate. I'm saying we've got to go beyond demonstrating. In other words, we got people together, we got them riled up. Now let's use that energy. Let's use those bodies to get some success, to get some changes made. That's what I want to see, change.
I don't disagree. I just wonder how we get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that is this, at least, from a perception that I have, is a lot of this organizing becomes a sort of social media mobs that show up. You have a social media army. You send out your tweets and whatever else. Hey, we're going to gather here and let's go march. But again, it's like, okay, well, that was great, but there's not that connection. There's not that cohesiveness. And then suddenly it's like, okay, everyone disperses until they get the next tweet. Or the next hashtag shows up because of a death or so forth. And it's like, okay, yeah, you're upset with people getting killed, but what's the next thing after that? And that's where we are.
What's happening. I understand what you're saying, and it's happening. For instance, a lot of the people that were marching are working the polls now.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get people to vote. They're trying to figure out how to vote. There are many of them that have offered rides to people. That's the stuff we used to do back in the day.
Right.
But they realized that, wait a minute, we need to do that. Last time we had an election like this, they weren't even participating. Right? So they're doing more. They're just trying to figure out what. So already what you were talking about is happening.
Yeah.
one thing that we need to do that we should consider, for example, I found I've been working with a couple of Black Lives Matter throughout the country. And one of the things I found out that I asked the leader of Black Lives Matter, do you have a telephone number of the mayor or the governor? I don't mean the office that everybody has. I mean, can you get right to them, without all the phone tag situation?
Right.
Then I asked my friends in government, I says, give me the name and the number of the local Black Lives Matter person. They couldn't do it. They said, well, I'll get it for you. So what I'm saying is that how can you have communication with the principal groups, the government, and Black Lives if they don't have means of communication directly? If there's an emergency, if I know your number, I can call you and we can squash it in the middle. But the way it is now, you on both sides, they're going round and round in circles trying to find out who to talk to. So one of the things I'm working on is, if you're in Atlanta, well, I'm working with a group in Birmingham. Get to know the phone number of somebody who can make decisions. Right. And vice versa, where they need to get in touch with you to find out, is that your people marching down Main Street or is that somebody else? You need to know that. So you got to open up these lines of communication. We had that. Like one of the things we remember back when the First Baptist Church in Montgomery, when Shuttlesworth got on the phone to Robert Kennedy, he didn't get to play phone tag. Well, see, we had those kind of connections. King had numbers to people in the administration. He had numbers to people of all the governments. So we need to reestablish those kinds of lines of communication, because in an emergency, you need to talk to someone. You don't need to talk to some underling who can't make a decision. Someone, let me speak to the manager. No, give me somebody who can make a decision. And that's what we need to do, is to open up those kinds of communication if we want to stop demonstrating and get some things done, because too many men and women have died and we need to stop it. And the only way you're going to do it is people are going to have to start talking to people who can make decisions, whether it's you want to defund the police or do whatever you want. These are the people you need to know. This is what we used to have, what we call a power analysis. We would identify in a city or state the people who we need to talk to. And sometimes they may not even hold office. They just might be some influential old citizen who has that kind of, like in here, Jimmy Carter holds no opposition now. But we know that if you can get Jimmy Carter's opinion on something, it's a good thing. Mm-hmm. And I mean, every community has people like that. And some are, like I said, money people, some people are political people. But you need to know those kind of people in your community who can help you solve problems and can also get information up and down the chain of command so that change can take place. Mm-hmm. But right now, we're at the point where everybody in every state is talking. And a lot of reform is being done. But what I'm saying is that we need a reform, national reform. And I was going to propose that they name it after Dr. Harbour or somebody, or John Lewis. I don't care who you name it after, but we need a national reform of police. And I said, we'll go one step further. So if you can't do that, why don't we have a national police academy? In other words, just like you have the FBI Academy, have a police academy. The police from all over the country would come here and be trained on the tactics that they need to be not only good policemen, but also citizen policemen. We need some commonality, and we're not getting that, because like I said, either one of us can go from state to state, and we will be treated differently because of our color. Right. And it should be the same. If you're a male driving a car, and you got a tail light out, each one of us should be treated the same, but it's not,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Charles, man, there's, yeah, thank you. I mean, that's, you still have the fire.
Well, as long as God gives me energy, I'll be there doing my little bit. And I know your mom will too, because, the torch is in your hands. Your group, you got to keep it going. And I know you will. But, the thing is there's no substitute for passion. You got to have a passion for what you do. And I just know that our better days ahead, because, I'm too old to march now. And besides, with my walker, I don't get too far.
I'm not marching anymore. I talk all day, but I'm not marching.
I want to go back to this quote one more time. I mean, once I got involved, it was infectious. Anything that had to do with protests, I was there. You finish that with, my life revolved around it. And you can still see that today. And all these years later, you're still fighting the good fight.
Yeah, well, we're gonna succeed because our country needs us. It needs you, and we need you. So just keep up the good work, guys. Hey,
right.
And whatever I can help do, you can call on me anytime.
Right on.
Sounds good.
Appreciate it. Thank you much. Levon, as always.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Loki.
All
Y'all
right.
take care now.
It's a pretty shirt you got on there.
Thank you.
Whose shirt? My shirt or his? Josh?
Yours.
Yeah.
Whose shirt?
Your
See,
shirt.
I was going to wear a coat and I didn't. I should have put it on.
No, we don't need a coat.
Okay.
You're in Georgia. You don't need no coat.
You're fine, babe. We don't have the letters on our clothes though, so it's all right.
Yeah, you got to earn those letters. That's why.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to wear all my medals and stuff for you, but
you got to earn those too.
I was going to do that. No, I had a reason I did it. I had a meeting earlier today, and I wore it for that. And I said, well, I didn't know how formal you guys wanted to be, so I said, well, I'll start off here. And I said, if I need to put on my jacket, I will. But it's like where I've been.
Yeah.
They didn't give me any medals for Anderson or Birmingham or Montgomery, but I have them for July and all those Vietnam and Japanese names from the Far East. So I have them for that, but I didn't have for those battles we had down south. And maybe somedays that's something you might do, is that you can have Anderson or Birmingham and all the new places that we are fighting these little wars. And hopefully, you can say, well, I remember,
Yeah.
I think that's happening. We are learning our history a little late, but we're learning it.
Yeah.
And all these books that are coming out, all these people that are talking to each other, we're finally learning history, and we're learning what can happen.
Yes.
You don't pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Let's keep fighting the good fight and keep making good trouble.
Always.
All right, y'all.
All right, take care. It was nice meeting you.
Take care. I enjoyed it, you guys.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be afraid to get uncomfortable.